Hey there, you're either watching or listening to The Climb. The Climb is brought to you by the Digital Mastermind, and the Digital Mastermind is a group of agency owners, marketers, technologists, a lot of people that are the best at their game that just want to come together and help each other out. So if you want to join this tribe, go ahead and shoot me an email, John, Jon, at digitalmastermind.com, or check out the website and shoot me a form through there. But today I have a couple announcements. One of those is based on the premise of the Digital Mastermind. The Digital Mastermind actually started, which is getting people together, and those people would physically get together, and we still do that. But events are very important. That's what I'm getting at. Whether you want to network, whether you actually want to learn something, take away something, so you can up your game and be the best marketer, technologist, or agency owner that you want to be. And with that, we have a friend of the DMG that is giving a fantastic offer. It's Drew McClellan from the AMI, the the Agency Management Institute, and it's $200 off his ticket for the BABA conference, which is May 25th and 26th in the fantastic, one of my favorite cities, Chicago, Illinois, and I'll be there because it is a fantastic event. So I highly recommend checking that out. We'll also go have the Climb is the discount code, and that'll be located in the show notes and the description. And speaking of events, we've also just announced ours, which is going to be, you're actually hearing it for the first time, October 17th, 18th, and 19th in beautiful sunny Florida. And we'll have more information on that. So either way, check out, I recommend going to both of these events. Of course, I'll be there. And there's even more. I try to go to at least one a quarter. Sometimes I'll even go to one a month. And now that things are starting to open up and we're getting over this thing that we call COVID, it should be a part of your continual education and your repertoire to make sure that you're the best at what you do. And now that all of that is over, I'd like to talk about our guest today, who is Marvin L Storm. I believe I'm saying his name right. It is Marvin L Storm. And we had a fantastic interview. Dave actually made it for this one. So Dave, why don't you come out here and we can talk about our friend Marvin.
Hey, how's it going? 2022.
2022. That's right. This is the first show of 2022.
Yep.
New year, new you. Any resolutions?
No, I don't really do that. But I loved your monologue right there. Like you're on a roll. I actually think maybe you should start off with a what's on John's mind. Start for everything. It was good.
All right, good. Thank you. I appreciate the compliment. Since we're giving out compliments, nobody goes home with too many compliments at the end of the day, is what one of my college professors said. That's a good color on you, my friend.
Oh, thank you. I like it. Goes good with my skin tone.
Yeah. So you've never done resolutions?
Oh, yeah. I've done them in the past, and most of them don't work. I just don't think of it like that anymore. It's not like there's not some magical date that's going to give me willpower. It has to come from me no matter what. So when I make decisions to change things for my life, I just do them. It's cold turkey and I do it. So, I was having a daughter, quit smoking, cold turkey. When the pandemic hit and everybody was getting shut down, this was 2 years ago, I was like, okay, everyone's going to use the lockdown as an excuse to put on 15 pounds and get fat. So I'm going to do the opposite. And I just Googled keto and started keto just right off the bat, lost 40 pounds. So you just have to have willpower.
Michael Gass too was a factor in there as
correct.
Well, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, he was the proof in the pudding. That's like, yeah, you do this, you'll lose weight. So that feeds your willpower, right? You see it works. That's what blows my mind when I talk to other people. And I'm like, this is all you got to do. And they're like, yeah, but I'm like, so you don't really want to lose weight? Because this is all you have to do. And those people just don't have the willpower.
I think it comes down to, there's a great book, Atomic Habits. And granted, I organically stumbled across some of these. I always believed in streaks, right? So whatever you're doing, if you continue that streak, whether it's writing or learning something or just doing something, flossing or whatever, and you don't break that streak, it becomes ingrained in you and it's a habit. It becomes so much easier. It's just a part of your routine. I love routines, very routinized in the way that I go to bed, wake up every morning. And I think that is what people are looking for in that resolution. And unlike you, that stark, jarring thing that happens at the beginning of the year. And I know people that have quit drinking and quit smoking at the beginning of the year and it's worked out, but I think they're the exceptions. Mm-hmm. But I think it just comes down to just that habit. It's substantially easier on your brain than it is to just have that jarring thing that you hope for at the beginning of the year.
Well, I've read that it takes 17 days to create a habit.
Yeah,
I feel like that's about right. I mean,
But there's all these numbers everywhere. It's
Yeah.
So it's 21 days. It's so on and so forth. There's all these different things out there. I think the main thing is just it's a streak. Once you have that streak, it doesn't matter whether it takes 3 days, 20 days.
Sure.
You just need to continue that streak and don't break it.
You also need to layer in the psychology of your own rhythm, because we all have our own rhythms, and when you get worn down or you start getting in a funk, those are really easy ways to fall back into your old routine.
Great point. Yeah.
And you need to be very mentally aware of, hey, I'm heading into a stressful time. Hey, make sure I don't binge eat. Hey, make sure I don't eat that chocolate or fall back on those old routes. So,
and I think to that rhythm is kind of what our guest was talking about, because it's granted today's the interview centered around like business exits, right? But that rhythm is building up that business, and then you're now exiting that business, and then what do you do from that point? And I think rhythm is something that's very important to me. But yeah, you get it all the way there, but then you have this jarring thing,
right,
which is an exit. You're like, oh, all right, what do I got to do? Very few people have something lined up right after.
How many times have we talked about the potential sale of our business, and then almost instantly we're like, but what are we gonna do? So,
like two cartoon characters.
Right. So, I have no motivation to sell because I have absolutely no clue what I would do after.
I think if the number's right, you figure that out. But yeah, we've had Taylor Trusty on the show, and like he sold his business, and it was like, okay, like he went to a cabin to try to figure out what to do next. So it's very scary. But I think if you have in mind what you want to do from there, not the BS cliche, like have the greenest lawn on your block and watch TV all day after retiring, I think it can be effective. Or you just roll it up and turn it into something. I think there's a lot of successes in that as well.
Yeah, and it really, you have to figure out for yourself what that is, and is that going to sustain you? Because if you've made it this far, you've developed and built a successful business, you've probably put your heart and soul into it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people just can't not do that.
Right.
That's their identity. So I mean, you don't want to be one of those tragic stories, and I don't want to put a really dark cloud on this episode, but you sell your business and you don't have any purpose, and then you end up passing away a year later because you never found a purpose. There's a lot.
Andy Rooney, he retired, and the next day he died.
Right.
But I agree.
A lot of instances of that.
You also don't want to be the guy at the dog track with the socks and the sandals, smoking cigarettes through the green visor, and everybody meets these people like, oh, he made a bunch of money and he sold it, and you're like, yeah, well, is he happy? Like, I mean, right. It doesn't look like it.
You definitely need to collect some healthy hobbies before even considering selling or retiring. So
yeah, I agree. Any recommendations there?
I mean, I got big into gardening this year. It's been an extremely fun hobby. Didn't know how rewarding it was. And it actually really kind of connected me with my grandfather. My grandfather was a big gardener. And I kind of, didn't really value it. But then I think about the memories of eating corn on the cob that he grew, at his house. And I was like, man, that's such a great memory. I want my daughter to have that and connect on that level. And so there was a lot of layers that really added to it. And, first it just started as a project of, look, I built a business. I like building. So at the start of gardening, you're building something, and it produces, and you have to tend to it. I mean, there's a lot of analogies. I've sat there pruning and thinking about, this is just like building a business.
Oh yeah. You look up quotes that you're going to definitely stumble on some that are related to business, the harvest as, and farming. Yeah, I think projects are a good idea. But I think also at the same time, those are like hobbies, right? I golf, but I think my hobbies don't necessarily give me purpose. I guess they could if I wanted to be more competitive with it. And I think that's the thing. People's identity gets wrapped up in their performance based on what they do as it applies to business. And I think with our guest, one thing that he has done is he's created multiple businesses and sold them. So it's like something that, you're continually letting these children go in some respect. And he gets into some of that. I don't want to take away from it, but I think as we begin to get to this stage of our career, we're going to experience some of that. Like, all right, how are we going to that next stage? And I think we're going to make it. I think it's going to be right. You got your garden. I'll find something.
What I thought was interesting about the interview with him was that his skill set really was in positioning and maximizing the value for the business. Like, so the business that he got into, he looked at it and goes, I can make this worth more.
Yeah.
That's his skill set. And I was like, man, that's like, how many layers above everything do you have to be to sit there and go, I just need to look at the business model and I know I can add value to it. I mean, that's great. It's such a phenomenal skill set.
Yeah, no. And I love when somebody can look at a P&L, and I've seen some turnaround experts that instantly know, like, okay, I can get into this and I can make 20% more than they're doing, literally based on all the resources and everything that they currently have. I can get in there and tweak that. And I love that. It's almost a superpower, but it's definitely a skill. Anybody can learn it. Hell, you listen to a lot of the catalog in this, you could probably even do that with your agency. So without any further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce you to our interview with Marvin L Storm. Please like, share, comment, and do whatever you can to contribute to the show, because it's much appreciated. Thank you so much. Hi, Marvin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm excited to chat a little bit about, business exits and how I got where I'm here.
All right, right on. So how did you get here? What is your climb?
Well, my career path is probably not too different than a lot of entrepreneurs out there. You never think you're going to end up where you end up. I started out in public accounting, actually, got my degree in accounting, and thought that's kind of where I would spend my career. And one thing led to another. I was playing pickup basketball every Tuesday nights for a couple of years and bumped into a guy, and we became really good friends. And before you know it, we're talking about business and our dreams. And a while later, we just turned in our resignations and rented a small office space in downtown and in a high rise, and bought a couple of desks and some phones, and we were in business. And so that experience was kind of educational from the perspective that we were starting from absolutely scratch. We didn't know a lot. We didn't know what we didn't know, actually. But after 10 years working together, his objectives and career goals changed, and mine did too. And so we actually stepped away, exited that business, and he went right and I went left. And because he was a little bit older than I was and had a little bit different perspective on where he wanted to end up. And so I just got involved in another business, started it from scratch, and exited that. And then I actually acquired a business, a national, platform business. I sat on the board of directors of this company, and they approached me and wanted to know if I wanted to step in, and they financed that exit. And a few years ago, I stepped away from that and got to really thinking about, what's next. You often think that you get to a point in your life, and that's certainly where I was at, that I thought I would go from the fast lane, with the pedal to the metal when you're working long hours, as every entrepreneur does, to kind of get over to the right-hand side and in that slow lane and take life a little slower and easier, and maybe even pull off the road and park there for a while. And I found out very quickly that was not as exciting as I thought it was going to be. And so I got to thinking about my career and the different times I've exited. And what I really sort of zeroed in on is that if I had been a little bit more dialed in to the whole process of optimizing your business prior to actually stepping away from it, I probably would have done a lot. I know I would have done a lot better in those exits. But myself, like a lot of entrepreneurs, the time arrives, and entrepreneurs are really good at doing what they do. But when it comes to kind of optimizing and monetizing all their hard work, they don't do that very often. And I've only done it three times in my career, and you just don't get good at it. And I thought, I could probably, share some insights from my experience, and, invite people on my podcast that could talk about, their experiences and exit. What I actually did, instead of on my podcast, which is called Business Exit Stories, I don't interview the actual entrepreneur. I interview the deal makers, the mergers and acquisition advisors, the attorneys, the CPAs, wealth managers, investment bankers, business brokers, people that do this every day, all day long. And they bring some of their more unique and business transactions they've been involved in where they facilitated an exit for an entrepreneur. And they talk about the good and the bad and some of the really ugly stories where people have pancaked and dropped that baton on the last lap.
What were your
And
businesses?
I was involved in the equipment leasing business. That was when I stepped away from the accounting world, and then I got involved in the franchise environment and acquired a national-based franchise and kind of repositioned that and spun out a different concept out of that.
So when you're looking at a business that you would join, is it pretty much all numbers? You're like, okay, these numbers make sense. I think I can get it there. Or are there other factors as well?
Oh, there's a lot of other factors. It's the opportunity, positioning in the marketplace. What's the upside? When I looked at the last business that I acquired, there was opportunity because the founder had kind of gone asleep at the wheel. And as I said, I was on the board of directors, and he got founderitis, got caught up in his own press clippings and thought he was smarter than the average Joe. And what actually happened was that he was in the right place at the right time. And his business kind of took off on him. And he got to believing that he was the reason that the business was doing so well. And he started taking long vacations and spending a lot of time away, making, $400,000 or $600,000 a year, putting it in his pocket and feeling pretty good about himself. But when you take your eye off of the ball, market changes, competition comes in, and he just got caught flat-footed. And he borrowed a bunch of money to buy out his partner because his partner didn't agree with what he was doing. And he leveraged up the business. And when the market turned, he was caught over leveraged. And that was, when I came in and was able to acquire the company under those circumstances. So I looked at it as, here is someone that's dropped the ball. There's still a lot of opportunity here, although the numbers weren't all that great. I saw opportunity. I saw I believe that I could do what I do best and apply it to this specific scenario and leverage it up. And that's what I did. And it worked out very well.
So in that sense, you're kind of like a turnaround expert, right?
Well, I did in this particular case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Other businesses weren't turnarounds. They were startups. I just, saw an opportunity and with my partner, we just, identified an opportunity and a gap in the market and thought we could do a better job, and off to the races we went. It could have not turned out quite as well as it did. You take that risk and you're starting from scratch and you think you know a lot, but you find out when you're into it, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. This is really hard.
That's the story of my life. So as far as you saying, hey, I think there might be an opportunity here, until you actually buying the business, and my next questions are going to be duration based, like how long is that period? Is that months, weeks, years?
Well, to take the last situation, it was several years because I sat on the board and I watched the business kind of spiral downwards. And so I was aware of what was going on. And so were the equity partners in the business that had lent the founder some capital to buy out his partner, and they had an expectation of being repaid. And when those expectations weren't met, the proverbial crap hitting the fan happened very quickly. And so when the opportunity opened up, I had to make a decision whether I wanted to step into that or just, it was a challenging situation, and I had to make that decision relatively quickly. But I saw in slow motion what was happening over a period of a couple of years.
What kind of business was it?
It was in the logistics business, of moving things around the country.
Well, they need you now more than ever, man. I don't know if you've heard.
Yeah, the world has changed in the last few years, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, all right, you buy this business, and then how long until you turn it around so you can then sell that?
It was about a 5, 6 year period of time.
Okay.
I one of the things I didn't really appreciate, although I intellectually understood it, is that when you get in bed with people that are funding your business, and I acquired this business by taking other people's money,
Mm.
and it was private equity. Private equity is simply where a couple of guys or a group get together and they go out to investor groups or institutions and they get money into a fund, and they have an expectation of 5, 7, maybe 10 years that they're going to invest the money and give a above market return to their investors. And so there's a time clock. As soon as you take that money, you kind of punch that time clock and it starts running. And although I understood that, uh, in reality, I was just working hard and got the business and it was growing and things were going great. And we're in a board meeting and the equity partners on the board, they say, well, it's time, you know, uh, we need to think about positioning for a monetization event and to sell the company. And I was not ready to sell the company, although I intellectually stood that date was coming.
Hmm.
When it actually arrived, it was too soon. I was not ready. I pushed back a lot, saying, if we just hold on for another year or two, we can double the money. And they said, well, that may be true, but we have investors we have made commitments to, and we can't step outside of the parameters of our agreements. And so it's time. So get your butt in gear and get this
Wow.
thing sold. So it worked out fine. But those are kind of the things that most entrepreneurs out there, when they think about growing a business, I often get the question, why in the crap you want me to worry about selling my business? That isn't going to happen 5, 10 years down the road. I'm too busy to think about working on positioning my business for an exit. That's stupid. I get it. Been there, done that. But I can tell you the data doesn't support waiting down the road till you get right up to a month or a year before you're exiting and you start pulling things together to exit. uh, you're rarely able to optimize the value that you get. It just doesn't work that way. And so it's not so much that you spend a lot of time, it's more of a thought process. Uh, so,
With your experience with the private equity, now that you had that experience, do you view it favorably, or would you tell an entrepreneur to stay away from that as much as possible?
well, whenever you bring capital in, you're doing it for a reason. People will sell off a part of their company to raise money to expand their company, enter a new market, develop new products, hire new people, whatever. Uh, but whenever you take, whether you borrow the money from a bank, if you borrow the money on a debt basis, there's an expectation of being paid. And as long as you know what those expectations are and you've done your homework, that can be a great thing. When you leverage company appropriately um, with debt, uh, uh, can work out very well. People have built fortunes, generational fortunes, by using leverage appropriately, and they've also pancaked when they over leverage a company. When you take private equity, it's generally in the form of a percentage ownership in your company. It may be a minority share, maybe 20, 30, 40%, or maybe majority, over 50% of your company. But you're doing it because there is an expectation that by taking the money, whether it's debt or equity, that you're going to make a lot more money by taking the debt than not taking it, because there's an opportunity there. You want to grow and get a jump up on your competitors or whatever the situation is. So it's neither a good or a bad thing. The thing that I would say is that as long as you understand the strings that are attached to whether it's debt or equity that you're taking into the company, and that you can manage that relationship and you can manage the expectations of repayment or growth or the financial metrics that you've committed to, it can be a great thing. But just like anything else, if you don't manage it appropriately, it can turn around and bite you in the butt.
So What are the expected returns with, like, let's private equity? Like, can you ballpark? You don't have to talk about your deal, but like, what should someone like? Hey, I'm going to go get some private equity guys and gals to come in. What would they expect?
Well, depending on the type of private equity fund that it is, they have an expectation of, double or tripling their money. And that's why they would go to outside investors and say, we have a specific idea and concept here. We're going to acquire, companies in this vertical, and we're going to roll them up. We're going to buy a bunch of companies in the same industry. We're going to be able to reduce expenses with the back end, like accounting and HR and things like that. We're going to be able to centralize those back end expenses. We're going to be able to leverage our marketing and our core competencies in there. And, we anticipate in a 5-year period of time, we're going to triple your money. That's what private equity would do. And they would invest the money with the expectation that an entrepreneur is going to take their money and be able to grow their company exponentially, to grow it very quickly. And because they are leveraging that money, there's an expectation for return. So generally, private equity, you hear that term tossed around a lot, and there's a bunch of it out there today. With low interest rates being low, stock market being pretty volatile. You don't know when the other shoe is going to drop. If you have a great business, you will attract the attention of people that are looking for good businesses that can expand. So it's a good time for entrepreneurs out there if they're looking to exit or expand and grow their company.
So at any point in you taking the money where they're like heated conversations like, Marvin, you got to hit these numbers, man, or were you smooth sailing?
No, there was, when you're an entrepreneur and you make your own decisions and you're the only one you're answering to, and that was most of my career. And that's the unique thing about entrepreneurs. They're not afraid of risk. They take calculated risk. They like solving problems. They like sailing their own ship. They don't necessarily. That's the reason they started their own business. They don't want to work for somebody else. And then all of a sudden, you've taken outside capital into your business, and those folks have an expectation. You now are reporting, and you have agreed. Generally, they're not going to make the investment until you have made a presentation and put together, some spreadsheets and your vision of how you're going to grow the company. And then there's an expectation that you're going to achieve those goals. And if you don't, it can get very uncomfortable, because I've seen situations and sat on, boards of other companies where the entrepreneur just goes ballistic because the financing people in the company are holding him accountable for not hitting targets. And I've seen it where you take the yellow pad and throw it across the board table and it flies off, and he's saying, this is my company, I'm going to run it any way that I can. You just back off, you'll get paid, and then stomp out of the room. I've seen it. That's a real live scenario and situation, because the entrepreneur is full of ego. He's always controlled his company, and now he has somebody else he's accountable to. And when you don't really understand that, you have to set your ego aside a lot of times, and that can be pretty difficult.
Yeah, I bet. Now, how does one approach if they want to get funding? Like, how would you recommend whether it's PE or something? Is it what we just understand? Put your deck together and just hit the road, or is there other avenues?
Well, it kind of really depends. You normally have a plan in mind that you need outside capital, and you do your homework and you reach out to people in that specific vertical that are interested in your type of company, and you get out and literally go start talking to people and making presentations. And that's how getting equity of any type, whether it's startup capital or anything, you have to talk to a lot of people, and the timing has to be right, where the people who are making those investments have the capital available, and they're interested in your niche, and they look like the business proposition that you've made looks interesting, and they will, take a run at it.
Right on. So let's talk about some challenges. What were some of the biggest challenges you've had over your climb, your career?
Well, I think this whole concept and why I got involved in working with people and started a podcast that talks about how people position their companies for an exit, because I went through it. I've had successful exits, and I've had one specific smaller exit that I belly flopped on. I
Mm.
just, like a lot of folks, you get to thinking you know more than you know, and because you got a double or a triple, that you think that this is easy, and every time you come to the plate, you're going to get a double or triple or hit a home run. And sometimes you miscalculate, and I did. I had to close down the business, walk away from it, and it was tough. I mean, that was one of the toughest things I've ever done. But the
Let's talk
numbers,
about that. Like, how did you miscalculate? What was the business like?
well, it was retail sensitive, and it was a retail type of concept, and I fell in love. I'd had two or three other locations that I'd opened that had turned out really well. And I just thought, as I said, I had the Midas touch. And I just thought, I can just lease almost anything and, put the right people in place and things are going to work out well. And I got really enamored with this one location. It was on a high volume traffic location, a brand new building. I got a key spot in that building. Even though the rent and here in California can get kind of pricey sometimes, I thought, well, that's not a problem. I can make this work, and I had that for a little under a 5-year lease, a little under 2 years, and I was bleeding money. I just couldn't make it work, and then the miscalculation I made was, yeah, there's a lot of traffic driving by here, hundreds of thousands of cars a day, but they were going someplace, and my this business was destination oriented. They were going from, either in the morning or in the evening or middle. They were going someplace. They weren't driving to my location specifically to do
What were you
business with
selling?
me. Huh?
What were you selling? Like, what was it?
It was in the packaging and shipping environment,
Okay.
and so people would have a large, you know antique, or something to get from San Francisco to Jacksonville,
Yeah.
and it's kind of tough to do. And so that was our specialty. And um, I just completely missed the boat on that. And when I locked the door and walked away, I had tears running down my face.
Oh man.
It was a realization that I had failed, uh, and it was hard to do. I had to let people go that had worked hard, but I had no, I had to make the right business decision because I was losing so much money on this location. I was taking, my own money and putting it in just to keep it open, and I had to walk it away. So I learned a lot, through that experience. I never got cocky again when it comes to those type of negotiations and thinking about expanding your business. I became much more reflective. And that was when I was fairly young. When you're young, you're impetuous and you think you can walk through walls. And I'd had, several really out of the park home runs at that point in time. And I was just sort of caught up in my own public relations, my own PR. I thought I was cool.
So what was that kind of like, what was the first signal you're like, okay, I should really pull out now? Because usually people, once they find themselves in a hole, they keep digging rather than stop digging.
Well, I was digging. I was digging. I was writing checks every month. And you do that for the first 9 months and year, and you have sort of that expectation that any new business that you've started, you're going to take time to, generate the revenue and get some momentum going. And on all my other businesses I'd had, it did turn around. But this one just wasn't. It became obvious, a year in, and I hung on a little bit longer than I should have. But it became obvious that this is not going to work.
Mm.
And I can continue writing checks in the hope that maybe year 3, year 4, this will be a great business. But no, I just had to face reality and bite the bullet and turn the key and walk away.
Man. So was it your personal money invested in this,
Oh
or
yeah, yeah, it was my
oh
personal
wow.
money. Yeah,
Would you recommend
painful,
somebody do that
painful.
again? Like, let's say, let's say today, like, would you use your own money, or would
Oh yeah.
you?
Yeah, I mean, that's what entrepreneurs do. They take the risk. I don't think there's any entrepreneur out there that has started something. You may get people that invest in you, family and friends, or a bank, or whoever, but you put your own skin in the game generally because you believe it. And that's what I did. I believed it. I thought this would work, primarily because I'd done it before. I'd been successful before,
Yeah.
and I didn't think this was going to be any different. I just made a strategic miscalculation, and so.
What'd you do
But
after that? Like, how long before you like licked your wounds and like, okay, I'm gonna
no,
go
I
and do.
no, that you just move on. One thing I've always done, you just move on. You can't worry about what you did in the past. And I think the entrepreneurial personality is that they have that ability, to just move on. And I did, and things turned out well. I mean, did bought my next business. It was shortly after that I got involved and as a board member to this company, and um, it opened up opportunities down the road.
Wait a second.
Primarily because I had this experience, and I viewed the world differently after that.
So this is when you were on the board, and then you ended up buying that other company. So you saw this guy making some of the same mistakes that you were made
Mhm.
previously. Oh, I love that.
It gives you an insight when you fall on your face and you skin up your nose and blacken your eye, and uh, you then become a little bit more cautious so that you're not stumbling, and that's what I did. I had the failure, and I licked my wounds and just moved on. Can't do anything about the past.
No. How many businesses? Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, one of our clients started a business, ran it for 10 years, constantly asking for the investors for more money, just a little bit more, and they kept going. And after 10 years, they got acquired, and he exited it. And he didn't get the payday that he wanted. He thought he was going to have this huge, that's what he was putting 10 years into. And I stay in touch with him because he's pretty much my business mentor at this point. And he got into kind of what you do is preparing companies for an exit. And he's got like $25 million worth of businesses, that he's working with right now. And he's like, the commission I'm going to get on this he's like, I should have did this 10 years ago. He's like, he just looks back at that lost decade and he's like, it's a lost decade. And
So it sounds like he's an M&A specialist or someone that facilitates exits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now
I work with those guys all the time, and if they're really good at what they do, they can do well. And more importantly, they can facilitate and create real value for their clients. And that's really who I interview on my podcast is, those M&A specialists and people like that, do all these deals. And it's just been a fascinating experience for me to listen to these hundreds of stories now of people that have stepped away from their business under different scenarios. And if I'd have had a podcast like this to listen to when I was going through, building and scaling my businesses and thinking about, when am I going to exit and things like that, it would have made life a lot easier.
Yeah. What is the pattern you see amongst most of them outside of just being entrepreneurs and wanting to exit a company?
I think that what I see as a common pattern is that entrepreneurs are just problem solvers. They're individuals that the reason they're in business, the reason they're growing their business is because not only do they want to sail their own ship, they get that energy, they get that excitement about identifying a problem, coming up with a solution, executing that, and seeing the results in real time. And that's just keeps them going, and why they work so hard, and why they're able to grow and scale their business. And they get this mentality, and I've been somewhat guilty of this, as I think most entrepreneurs are. They get that mentality that when it comes time to exit, they'll just figure it out like they've always done. So when the time gets close to exiting, they're just problem solver. They're just going to figure it out. Unfortunately, the data doesn't support that if you wait and you're not prepared, you're not going to be able to optimize it because you haven't done it. What an entrepreneur does is they do the same thing over and over again, and they become really good at it, and they become kind of the top of their game, an expert. But when it comes to exiting, you may only do it 1 or 2, 3 times your entire career. And so you never really get good at it because everyone is different. And so when they show up and it's time to step away, and it may come unexpectedly. It may be a bad health diagnosis. It may be because you're not getting along with your partner, whatever the situation is, that it kind of forces you into a situation where you start now thinking, I think I might want to, step away from this, sell it. And if you're unprepared and if you haven't done enough of the right things to prepare for that eventuality, it's unlikely that you're going to optimize the value.
I heard one of the most important things to do when you're exiting isn't like make sure you get the best amount of money, so on and so forth, is making sure that you have a plan after you exit.
Well, yep, I'm living example of that. I wasn't as prepared as I should have been. I just thought, I'd figure it out. But when your whole universe shifts from, as I said, the fast lane, driving 90 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you're driving 40, it's a different paradigm that you're dealing with. And you have to go through it to understand that. So I agree with you that you kind of have to figure out what's next and have that in place. And so that's, I talk to, the folks that I work with, you need to get that in place in advance too, because it isn't automatically going to happen. It's like anything else.
Yeah.
You don't go on vacation without making reservations and figuring out how long you're going to be gone and when you want to get back. It's not automatically going to happen. And selling a business and what's next is the same way. It just isn't automatically going to happen.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people are just so used to that 90 miles an hour, the grind, or whatever you want to call it, that they just tell themselves either A, I'll figure it out, or B, I'm just going to enjoy my time off. And then I know some people, it's been 2 years, they had a great exit and they're miserable. They're like, dude,
Yep.
I was like way happier when I was, in pain, trying to figure everything out and run the business than I am
Because
now.
there's purpose. They have purpose.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, better said.
when your purpose is taken away and nothing to fill that void, then life isn't meaningful anymore. And so you have to really figure out, kind of what's next. And for me, I found it in doing what I'm doing right now. It's more enjoyable than anything I've done before in my life. And it's just, I found a purpose in, helping folks not belly flop when it comes to exiting their business. And it's a process. It's not rocket science, but it's more difficult than you think because it's primarily you don't know what you don't know, because an entrepreneur hasn't gone through this. They think they may know. And I experienced that myself. And that's a common theme, is that you just don't understand the mechanics of what's going to happen and how it's going to unfold.
So how do you get paid in that situation? Are you a consultant, a coach? Do you get a piece of the M&A? What does that look like?
No, I just coach people,
Okay. All right. And then they sign up for like a retainer or something like that? And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so when they
You know,
exit,
someone
like,
that's a
it's
year or
going
two,
away.
someone's a year or two away has a lot of time.
Yeah.
And again, it's not that this is difficult. It's just that you have to be aware of how the process works. And was mentioned, the person that is an M&A advisor helping people exit the business, he gets paid on success fees and things of that nature. And I work with those guys all the time that they only get paid, and so I kind of tee the company up before it gets ready for an exit.
So what do you recommend with people that are preparing to sell their companies? Like what should they do? Right. So just, one day they wake up, whether they had the health scare or whatever, they're like, all right, I want to sell.
Well, hopefully you do that early. You start thinking about that far in advance. And
Like the day you start the company is a good idea?
Well, some companies are started to sell.
Yep.
Especially tech companies. If they have proprietary technology that they want to build and scale, and they already have an idea that they're going to be acquired at some point in time. And so depending on the type of business, but that's not traditionally what happens with an entrepreneur that starts a business. He doesn't think about how he's going to get out of it. You might spend, months, years figuring out that before you leave your employment and getting involved in business. You spend a lot of time and effort, planning how to get into the business and who the competition is and how you're going to price the product and everything. And you spend all this time getting ready to get started. And then you spend 2 decades or more, growing and scaling it. But then you spend 10 minutes thinking about how you're going to get out of it and how you're going to monetize all this hard work. And that's not a real great formula for success to be able to optimize your business. And so my counsel and advice is that you have to get into this frame of mind, because there's only so many things. If you think about it, there's only so many things that can happen to a business. You're either going to sell it to someone, that's a family member, a partner, an employee, a management team, or you're going to sell it to someone you don't know. And that may be a third party that is like you, maybe another company. But you don't know them, or you're going to liquidate the business. I just went through a situation where a guy that was making well into the 6 figures because he had a very specific expertise, and he'd built up a great business over 20 years and made a bunch of money during that process. But he was the business. Because of the expertise and the level of knowledge that you needed to provide the service. And so in his mind, he was just going to sell off the assets. He had some computers, some specialized equipment. He thought he may get $20,000, $30,000 just to sell this stuff off, and then he was going to wind it down. And we got together, and I chatted with him about it and said, you have all these customers that you've built up over 20 years. There's like 1,500 of them. And, that has value to somebody. You have this website, you have this reputation. These are goodwill. This is intangible assets that have value, will have value to somebody. And make long story short, he was able to find, after 3 or 4 months and kind of repackaging what he had done and going out and talking to people in the industry, he got nearly $300,000. For just his customer list and the website and things. And that's 10 times more than he thought he was going to get, because he didn't know. He just didn't understand that those intangible assets had value to somebody, and he was just going to wind it down and walk away. And so it's really like, it's just the process of knowing what you can do.
In the digital mastermind group, we're seeing an uptick in what are they called? ESOPs.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any trends that are leading towards founders basically? That's kind of like saying, it's an exit strategy, right?
Absolutely. ESOPs is the employee stock ownership plans. You have to be at a certain scale to make sense to do an ESOP. For a lot of entrepreneurs, I mean, it's a government regulated. It is under the ERISA laws for retirement plans and things of that nature, and it is very burdensome and complex for all the reporting requirements. And you have to have audited financial statements, and there's a lot of reporting requirements that you have to do valuations every year, and that's expensive. And so your business has to be at a certain scale for that work. But when the situation fits, it's a great tool for an entrepreneur to be able to monetize all the equity there, and also to give all the people that took the journey with them, spent 10, 20 years to reward them, so that you can create liquidity through the ESOP for people that have stock in the company to actually monetize that stock and keep the stock within the company versus selling it to an outside party. So there's a lot of advantages to it.
What characteristics do you see companies that get the highest multiplier in selling? Like, what are those characteristics?
Well, it may seem fairly obvious, but those companies that the entrepreneur isn't essential to the business. A lot of entrepreneurs build their business and they want to keep their hand in the pie, and that's what they get their excitement from. They're kind of control freaks, and they need to be there. They need to approve things. But the companies that do really create value, that would be interested to kind of look at it this way. If you're the entrepreneur, like the guy that I talked about here just a few minutes, that you have a core competency and you're absolutely essential for the business. So that's a bucket of buyers out there. And so if you're that type of person that has this core competency, then you're looking for someone with those same characteristics that's going to be able to step into your shoes. Well, that's a relatively small bucket of buyers out there.
Mhm.
However, if you've replaced yourself with a good operations manager and you don't have to be there every day, and yes, you're still involved in the business, but you're not absolutely essential, then the bucket of buyers out there is not a little sand pail that you go to the beach with, uh, it's kind of a 5-gallon bucket. And then if you're able to actually create a management team, and you are totally unessential to the business and you have really competent people, you may have hired a CEO and you're kind of sitting at the chairman of the board type of situation. Well, that becomes interesting to these private equity folks out there. And so now you have kind of a big bathtub full of, bucket, buyers out there. And then if you have this strategic acquisition out there, and people that throw traditional metrics out the window when it comes to acquiring a business because your business is strategically important to their company. And that's kind of the biggest bucket out there where you get the most bang for your buck. I'll give you an example. On the podcast a few months ago, there was a person that had built up a business, and the traditional type of entrepreneur, the old crusty guy that had spent all this time in the business, and he was getting in his 60s, and he had just started thinking about, well, maybe someday I'll sell the business. And if you run a business and it's a good business, you're going to get inbound calls all the time. People are going to be calling you up saying, we're interested in your business. Are you thinking of selling? And so he got one of these inbound calls, and the thing was, it was from a company that he knew that was in his same industry that he respected. And so his ears kind of perked up, and they entered into a dialogue. And in a couple of months, they had a term sheet, had agreed on a price, which was a fair price. And then COVID hit.
Mm.
And so what everyone did in the first early months of COVID, everyone stood back and said, well, we got to figure this out. Still interested, but we kind of got to figure this out. Well, this guy was really keyed up now. He had gotten that frame of mind that he was going to be selling, and his wife was planning these big trips, and so he reached out to an M&A advisor and said, we still want to move forward with this. And the M&A advisor came in and said, well, this is interesting. I see what you're doing here. If you'll let me, I will kind of reposition the sale, how you were positioning this company for sale, and we'll create a little bit different strategy. And we'll go out to other people in your industry that aren't in this region that you're in, and we'll see if they're interested in it. And to make a long story short, after 4 or 5 months, they went back to the market with a reposition type of presentation that they were going to give to buyers. And of course, the M&A advisor contacted the original buyer, said, are you still interested? They were still interested. Now, here's the trick. The original buyer found out that his biggest competitor was one of the other people that was at the table.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, because he did not want that competitor to get this business because it would put him at a strategic disadvantage. And so he just got out his checkbook. And the same company, less than a year later, wrote a check for 3 times as much as the original offer.
Oh, I love that for that guy selling the company.
Yeah. And one of the reasons he didn't want to bring on an M&A advisor initially, because he's going to pay all these fees and everything like that. Well, he still had to pay a big fee, but it was a lot less than the millions of dollars that he put in the pocket because he got 3X instead of X. And so that's just kind of the different types of buyers that if you think about it, your question was, how do you kind of prepare for X? Well, one of the things you really have to do is to kind of decide, what you think the type of buyer that you're going to be looking for, and then kind of work toward that. It may not work out that way, but at least you're headed in the right direction.
I'm looking for the buyer that's going to pay 3 times more than they want. That's
Well, you can do it. Let me tell you, that's not impossible if you do the right things to get to that point. It's totally possible, and that's the point.
Which leads me to M&A advisors. They're on your podcast. You've been speaking about them on this show. What should somebody look for in their M&A advisor?
Someone that has experience in doing similar types of deals to what you're doing. It's not necessary that they be an expert in your specific niche, but they need to have some real world business experience. And M&A advisors are like everybody else. There are people that are new to the business that don't have a lot of experience, and you just have to be sure that when you are dealing with someone that is going to be dealing, that's entrepreneurs, a business for an entrepreneur, generally speaking, and there have been surveys done on this, 70% of their total net worth is in that one asset in their business. And so if 70% of anything is in an asset, you want to make sure you're dealing with the right people. And it's not just the M&A advisor, it's kind of a team that you need to put together. You need your financial people, you need your tech people, your insurance people, you need to kind of have your exit team put together. It's just not the M&A advisor.
Got it. All right. No, that's sage. So what would you say are the most common mistakes you're seeing with entrepreneurs or people that are attempting to sell their companies now?
Well, we've talked about it repeatedly here. You just don't think about it in time, and you wait. And then when it comes time to sell, it's a fire drill and everyone is running for the exits. I'm writing a book, and the book's going to be called Pack Your Parachute. And it's really after the metaphor that pilots don't pack their parachute when their engines are on fire. That parachute is already packed and ready to go in case they have to grab it. And exiting a business is sort of the same way. You kind of want to have your exit parachute packed before you actually need it. Because if you're trying to pack it when you're in the middle of exiting, things don't go all that well. And so that's one. The type of revenue that you have is something that most entrepreneurs don't think about. If you have revenue, that's kind of one-off revenue. And I always use the example of a moving company. A moving company gets phone calls from people that are moving, and they may be moving out of the area. They may be going from California to Jacksonville or wherever, and they're never coming back to California. And so you have that one monetization event for that customer, and then you got to find a new customer. Or you have a company that has long-term contracts. And one of the companies that I've dealt with in the past is an heating, air conditioning and ventilation company, HVAC company. People always were calling them when the summer got here and they needed their air conditioning worked on, or the winters got there. And it was this roller coaster of revenue. And what they did is that because they couldn't service all the customers that were coming in at that time, they offered a maintenance contract where people would sign up and they would come out a couple of times a year. And then if something happened, they would be put at the front of the line. And so they had a premier membership sort of.
Recurring revenue.
And yeah. Now, the type of revenue for a one-off type of revenue may be 2x. Someone is willing to pay for that. A renewable or recurring revenue may be 6x, 10x. And so, entrepreneurs don't think a lot about the type of revenue they have, but buyers are certainly looking at the type of revenue. They're going to want to know how you get business and where it's coming from, and if it's renewable and predictable and things of that nature. That's a common thing that entrepreneurs don't think about. And, replacing yourself, kind of the hierarchy of management that you've created or don't create, those type of things. And of course, if you know that people are going to be looking at your financial statements, and a lot of entrepreneurs just don't have those financial reporting and their metrics in place. They try to scramble and put it together at the last minute, and all that does is create doubt, when that information isn't bulletproof. And doubt creates risk, and risk drives down price and increases the terms.
Got it. I appreciate it. And one final question. What haven't we covered today that the world should know?
Well, we live in an exciting time, actually. I'm an optimist. I think that the best is yet to come. I think that our economy and everything, although if you listen to the news, you would never come to this conclusion that the best is yet to come. news would
Tell
have
me
you
on it.
believe that.
Tell me on it, Marvin.
But I think it's exciting. I think business opportunities are exciting, and that there's a lot more to come. And for entrepreneurs out there is so much money out there to acquire good businesses. You really need to start thinking about it. If you haven't, and even if it's 5 years down the road, you really need to start thinking about it, because you really need to have your parachute packed. You really do. And that's a simplistic metaphor. But if you're prepared, and then unexpected things can and do happen, you're not going to be caught flat-footed. You can head for the exit with everything in place.
I would love to see the cover of your book with you like jumping out of the plane with it on fire behind you.
I haven't decided on the cover yet. But,
feel free to just take that idea.
Yeah, I went skydiving a few years back with my daughter. She turned 21, and we were in New Zealand, and on a business trip, I brought her with me, and I said, "What do you want to do for your 21st birthday?" And she says, "I want to go." We were walking through the airport in Auckland, New Zealand, and there was a big sign there for skydiving. I want to do that. And I don't necessarily like heights, and I tried to talk her out of it, but we ended up, 12,000 feet jumping out of a little teeny plane over the Bay of Isles in New Zealand. That's quite.
If you're gonna jump, that's the place to do it. And also making a story that your daughter is gonna tell forever. That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I can remember standing on that little square piece of metal and looking out. This tandem jump, and the guy says, "I'm going to tap you on the shoulder 3 times, and then you're supposed to roll forward." And I was hanging on the side of the plane so hard, he tapped and he tapped again, and then he just shoved me out. And we somersaulted out, and then he tapped me on the shoulder, and I was supposed to spread eagle, and I did spread eagle. So,
right.
It was a great time.
Oh. Well, Marvin, I appreciate you joining us today, man, and being so willing to share all that information. There was a lot.
Yeah, one thing I might do for your audience here is that I have a report that I've prepared for those that are starting to think about exiting. And you just go to the podcast website, businessexitstories.com /report, and just download it. And it gives you kind of a big picture overview of things that you need to kind of start thinking about. It's a quick read in PDF format. And I think anyone that reads it that has a business will learn something from that.
Yeah, please do. And then, one final question. How can people get a hold of you?
I would suggest that you just, you can email me at mstorm@businessexitstories.com, or just go wherever you get your podcast and start listening to the podcast, because these stories are absolutely fascinating. They're just things that you would never anticipate, and some real wins and home runs that and it's in the short story format, so you kind of learn by osmosis by listening to these entertaining stories. And I've had people say, "Well, I don't want to be like that guy. I don't want to turn out like he did. I got to start doing things a little bit differently." And that's the purpose of the podcast. And it's just been very gratifying for me to see people, start doing something well in advance, and it's going to make a big difference in what they eventually put in their pocket after they sell.
Awesome. I love that. Thanks again.
All right. Well, it's been fun. I appreciate the time.
Hope you enjoyed our episode. Please subscribe and review wherever you can. And if you would like to join the Digital Mastermind, go ahead and shoot me an email at jon@digitalmastermind.com, or visit us at digitalmastermind.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye now.